So hello everybody, I'm Kevin and I'm here today to talk to you about a new product we're very excited about, and it's this board here. This is a Raspberry Pi 5. It's the newest version of the Raspberry Pi board. As you may know, Kitronik, we're an authorized reseller of Raspberry Pi boards. We've been selling those for a while now. So that means if you do buy boards from us, you're guaranteed to get a genuine product. So yeah, we're excited about this board, and I'm going to show you also how it compares to Raspberry Pi 4, which is a board we've been selling for a little while now. As ever with these talks, Mark will be manning the questions, so if there's any questions you do have, please feel free to drop us a message and we'll do our very best to try and answer them for you. And if you're watching this video back and it's not live, still feel free to message us, and again we'll do our very best to reply to you and try and help you out with any questions you do have. So yeah, the Raspberry Pi 5, we're all very excited. So I'm sure you may be aware this board was announced about a week ago now. It's got some great benefits over the Raspberry Pi 4. We'll talk about those today. But yeah, it's something I'm sure a lot of people will be keen to know a bit more about due to the massive popularity of the Raspberry Pi board itself. So at the moment, the board's been announced, and then the board will be available to ship slightly later on this month, and again I'll tell you about that in a minute. Okay, so yeah, so let's get started. What I thought might be nice is if I showed you a very quick video which the Raspberry Pi themselves have done, sort of showing you a little overview of the board itself, and then we'll dive in a little bit deeper. I'll show you some close-ups of the board. We'll talk about the different accessories for it, the reasons for some of those accessories, a little bit about software, those kind of things. Okay, so let's just pop over to a window I've got here. If anybody wants to watch this video back, it's available at raspberrypi.com. I'm sure if you go straight to their website, you'll see like there's normally a big banner there, because obviously the Raspberry Pi 5 is a new exciting board, and you can click through into this page which tells you more about the Raspberry Pi 5 and a few other bits and pieces. But let's just start off by showing you this video. It's not very long, it's only about 50 seconds, and yeah, then we can carry on from there. Yeah, so there you go. That gives you a very brief overview of some of the bits and pieces on the Raspberry Pi 5, and again we'll show you on those the board I've got here close up in a second, and we can point some of those features out for you and just sort of tell you about them. I mean, one of the main reasons people are going to want to upgrade to a Raspberry Pi 5, it's going to be quite obvious, is the newer version is much faster. It's 2 to 3 times faster. It's now using a quad-core 64-bit Arm Cortex-A76 processor, so you're getting a massive processing uplift on the Raspberry Pi 4, and you also get an improvement with a dedicated a GPU for video. So depending on what you're using the board for, you know, if you use a desktop computer, you're going to get a much better experience with the Raspberry Pi 5 than you would do over a Raspberry Pi 4. If you're using a Raspberry Pi 4 in some kind of embedded application, whether that's industrial or, you know, we're obviously an education reseller in the education environment, you know, you've got one running like a weather station or something somewhere, you may feel that you know that speed increase is something you're not going to notice in that application. So it's a choice really, and obviously the Pi 5 is slightly more expensive than a Pi 4, so there's some choices there. But yeah, I mean, when you run this in a desktop mode, you really can feel the difference of that extra processing speed, so that's definitely a benefit for a lot of people. Okay, so I'm just going to pop back to my window capture here. So here's the board on our website. We are going to be supplying the board in a 4 gig and an 8 gig version at launch. So at the moment we're saying it's coming soon. Now we're expecting stock to be able to ship around about the week starting the 23rd of October. So if you want to get hold of one of these boards, that's perfectly fine. You can order. At the moment we're not taking pre-orders because we're going to do those at the point where actually we've received stock and we know we can guarantee sending them out. But what you can do is you can select the version you would like, and then down here there's this area whereby you can enter your email address, and as soon as stock lands on our website you'll get an email telling you that stock is available, and it won't, the moment this button's grayed out, but you'll be able to come in and purchase those boards and get yourself a Raspberry Pi 5. Yeah, interestingly, so we're going to be selling a 4 gig and an 8 gig version, so they'll give you a really good desktop experience. Obviously there's a slight variation in price, so you're going to pay more for an 8 gig version. You can see the difference there. One interesting thing which I think might be good for you, interesting to know, is on a Raspberry Pi 4 there's not really any way in which you can tell if it's a 1 gig, 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig version. What the Raspberry Pi team have done on this version is they've added these indicator. So this is an 8 gig board I have here, and what's happened, you can see this little component at the top that's been mounted next to where it says 8 gig, and then we've got 4 gig, so the 4 gig would have the component in that position instead. And there are positions for 1 gig and 2 gig, so I'm assuming at some point in the future we may see those variants of this board, but at the moment there'll just be the 8 gig and the 4 gig available. Yeah, and it's quite nice for people who in the past, if you've got multiple Pis kicking around, you couldn't always easily tell what memory was on board. So yeah, this is the boards as they are. You're about to buy them here, and then we also have some accessories, and I'll show you those in a minute, and I'll also explain why those some of those accessories are specific and useful to a Raspberry Pi 5. Okay, so as I've explained, we should have some stock later on in October. That stock will be reasonably limited. So that's, I guess we're calling that batch 1, and then we will be expecting further deliveries and be able to supply further stock in around the sort of November, December period. So late November, December, we're hoping to have more boards. So at the point when you can buy the stock, if it's out of stock and you are ordering, that is generally when we would be hoping to supply you. And then I'm sure in the future the boards will become more and more available and easier to get hold of. Okay, so let's sort of do a little sort of close up on the product itself. Okay, so let's see if I can bring this down. Okay, so this is a Pi 5. Let's get the focus right. And here we have a Pi 4. I think you can see the board's pretty similar, really. We've got the processor here, we've got the old processor there. We've still got the wireless section here. We've got the USB-C power in, dual monitor support, and then on the other side we have the you can see the RJ45 and the USB connectors. And then there are a few differences. One of the ones that's it might sound like a small thing, but I'm sure some people will find it exciting, is that this version now has a power button on the end, so you can click it here to access power on and off features. So no more sort of getting on the ground and climbing around underneath a desk to try and turn a board off. Other differences: the 3.5mm audio output on a Pi 4, that's gone now. I guess something had to give to make space for some of the additions on here. But what we do have is we now have dual lane support for cameras and displays. So these can be either or. There's two of them here. So again, you use these little ZIF connectors. We have the power button. What additional have we got? And then we have a PCIe connector here. So this can be used for expansion of, I guess, PCIe based peripherals, which can be quite nice. and then you've got the typical dual monitor support that we had on the previous version here. And we also have the standard hat connector in the same position. So yeah, if you've got hats, they should be fine on here. Obviously, there might be some variations in software. We're just trying to get our heads around that a little bit at this point in time. We're not totally sure, but certainly mechanically they would fit in the same position. So yeah, just to go briefly, so we've got that connector again, USB, RJ45 connectors here for cameras and display boards, graphic outputs, HDMI. Using the adapter to go to the bigger connectors, power in, power button on the side, and then the PCIe connector. So yeah, it's a neat little board. I think it's kind of what you'd expect. On the bottom we have the SD card there for running your software, components on both sides, but it looks and feels like a normal Raspberry Pi board would. So I don't think there'll be any surprises there. I mean, there's a slight difference here in that these connectors are now in the opposite order, but yeah, it's kind of what it is. And this is a newer, faster processor here, and we do have, you probably saw on the video earlier, Raspberry Pi have now created their own silicon chip, which you'll see here, and this is to do with dealing with the I/O relating to the board. So the processor talks to this, and then this talks to the I/O, so the USB, the things like that outside. And I think they're very excited to have their own silicon now on board a Raspberry Pi board. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of a brief overview. You can go to the Raspberry Pi website, and there's a lot more technical detail there. Should you want that? But yeah, it's a very interesting board. There are a few new requirements to kind of run this board, and I'll sort of go over this a little bit. One is power requirement. So the recommendation for best performance on this board is a 5V 5A power supply, and Raspberry Pi are releasing one of those. I can show you online in a second, specifically for that reason. So let me just do it now actually. So this will be the Raspberry Pi 27W 5A USB power supply, which is ideal for Raspberry Pi 5, but it is a standard USB-C power supply, and it can be used for any USB-C application. And the good thing about Raspberry Pi power supplies, in my experience, is they are extremely high quality. So if you do need a USB-C power supply that's going to deliver very high current, and 5 amps is very high current, this is a great choice. And when we're selling it, because we're a UK-based education supplier, we're selling it with a UK plug. They will have, and there are going to be available variants of this with different types of plugs on, so you can get your standard USA plug, European plugs, and those kind of things. So yeah, they will be available from I guess resellers in those regions. So yeah, and you can run it on a like a lower ampage power supply, like the one for the Pi 4, which is a 3 amp power supply, but it can affect performance in some ways. So we would definitely recommend, if you're going to buy a new power supply and you want the best performance from your Pi, that you go out and buy this 27W 5 amp version, which is great. One of the other fun accessories is the case they've got. So as you can see the case here, we haven't got lots of images at the moment. Unfortunately, I don't have one to show you in person, but it's like the other previous Pi cases, and the Pi snaps neatly inside of it, but it's got some nice other features. So that you can see here, this top section will pop off, so you can take this cover off, and then you can get access to well, you can see the board on the inside, but you can get access to the hat connector, which is what we can see just here. So you can run the board in a case and still attach a hat should you wish to, which is really nice. And there are also some other points in this sort of clear case where you can run different wires out. So yeah, they're things to kind of be aware of. So they're great cases. I'm going to show you in a minute why this case has a fan, and why that can also be important in the performance of your Raspberry Pi. Okay, so just, sorry, wrong one there. Okay, yeah, so I'm just going to make sure I didn't miss anything. So we talked about the speed, 2 to 3 times faster, dedicated GPU, which is great. It supports things like OpenGL and Vulkan. You've got the dual 4K HDMI outputs. We've got 4 gig, 8 gig options. As previously, it supports Bluetooth and it supports Wi-Fi. The micro SD card on there, PCI interface, which is great for different future expansion of the board. Things like an M2 NVMe hat is in the works, I believe. I'll show you some images of that in a minute. That will allow you to put things like SSD drives and connect them into your Raspberry Pi. So if you want to run off those instead. We've got the normal USB ports, gigabit Ethernet, which is great. We've got the 2x4 lane MIPI camera display ports. Talked about the ampage for the power supply already. Oh, it does have a real-time clock on board. So the new Pi 5 has a real-time clock on board, and you can also buy an optional backup battery. So you can plug an external battery in to the board on one of the headers. Just trying which one it is. It says it's probably put down here. So just here, you can quite see this header says BAT just above. You can see BAT. So this little this pops out, and then you can get access to that. I don't know. You may wonder what these are for now. So I can explain it briefly. Oh, I probably shouldn't try and put it back on. I won't bother. But what it is some of these connectors have these little pull-out like tops on, and there's a reason for that. So these components are all placed by pick and place machines. Now the pick and place machine uses vacuum to pick a part up out of typically a tape, and it will then move that component and place it into the specific place on the PCB where it needs to be. Now for that vacuum to work, the vacuum head needs to go onto a flat surface that can suck against. Well, if you imagine these connectors, they don't have a flat surface at all. So there's one here, and one here. So these all have a little like cap in them that the vacuum head picks off and can place the component, and then in use you just pull them out and you get access to the connector as it should be underneath. So here we have the one for the battery, and over here we have the fan connector, which you can see just here. So yeah, if you ever wondered, therefore that's for that reason. It's so that the machines that are used to manufacture the boards can actually pick the component up. So yeah, we've got but yeah, there's a real-time clock on here, and that would allow you, if you're setting things like date and time and things like that, if you put the backup battery in, they're retained by that backup battery. So it's not an issue if you're losing them. You don't have access to the internet and it can't pick the time up that way. Yeah, that works well. So that's something to think about. Okay, so why is it important to maybe have a fan in the case? Well, there's a really nice article on that on the Raspberry Pi website. So heatsink cooling, here we've got Eben showing a board off with this is another product you can see on here. This is like a cooling hat. So if you put the Pi into a case, that case has that fan there to cool the board down. But if you're not using a case, this product is also an option, which has a heatsink with heat transfer pads on the bottom that push onto the components that get hot, and things like the processor do get hot. And then the fan there will blow air across that heatsink and cool those parts down. So obviously it talks, it's a little bit, you can read this in detail. It's really, if you ever want to find it, when I said we've got this Raspberry Pi 5 section of the website, here we go. It says heating and cooling, which is what I've opened now. There's also some great other videos and things you can watch that are interesting. There's one here where you'll see Eben talk for a long period of time with James, one of his the guys designed the board here. So these are some really interesting things you can read. Well, I find them interesting, at least. But yeah, heating and cooling. So they can measure the temperature, but to stop it being a massive problem, so you can obviously run this board without any heatsink on it whatsoever, and it will work fine. But the way it does that is it does something called thermal throttling. So if a board gets too hot, what it will do is it kicks the performance of the board down to therefore generate less heat. So if you want full board best performance of the board, you need to keep the temperature of the CPU below this thermal threshold, which you can see here, which is this line. So here we have a board. So we've got a board, we're stressing it out, we're doing some interesting stuff, and over time, look, the board's got quickly hotter and hotter and hotter, and then it hits this thermal throttle limit, and the performance will be dialed back. Okay, so but what we can do is we can keep the board cool. And there's a few ways we can do that. So we can do that with this active cooler, which is the thing I talked to you about a minute ago. And again, so you can see it spinning here. And what that will do is we then produce this kind of graph. So we have the red line, which is without the cooler on at all. The orange line shows you the with that cooler attached, so it's the heat sinks there, but it's not blowing, so it's not blowing heat through the heat sink. So that means the chip doesn't get as hot as fast, but eventually it does get hot. But once we put the fan on, by connecting it to the fan output on the processor, we can see now that we're keeping it nice and cool, and the board can continue to perform at its maximum performance without that being an issue. Okay, now this is some nice little sort of thermal pictures there of that happening. And this is when we talked earlier about having that PCIe connector on the edge, which is on the edge of the board here. This is an example of a hat. So yeah, it's an active cooler and the prototype of the upcoming M.2 hat. So the M.2 hat will allow you to put like an M.2 SSD drive in, and you can connect it back into your Pi using the PCIe ribbon cable here into that connector on the board. Now, obviously, with that on, we'll probably we will be restricting the airflow across the top of that heatsink. But what we can see here is, which is this light green line, though it is getting hotter, it's still staying well below the thermal limit, and won't be getting any throttling of performance whatsoever. So that's nice. And then the product we're selling, which the reason we're selling this is because we feel really that in the education market, a case is a much sort of, you're much more likely to have a case than this product, the active cooler. So you can have them in these cases. They're nicely away from your students. The case is a really neat, nice looking thing. It just looks smart, but it's also protecting the board. But it also has the benefit that it has this fan built in. And then again here, what we can show is that we've got the fan. So and they've got two graphs here, and we're showing both with that top lid on, so the one where you can't see, you can't put a hat on, or you can't see that clear section of the case, and also with it on or with it off. Now with that lid on, we are restricting airflow a little bit. So the light blue line says with lid. You can see here it says with lid, and this light blue line is slightly higher than without the lid on, because we can get more airflow in without the lid on. But even then, still, though it is hotter than the active cooler, we are still again below those thermal throttling limits. So if you want to, again, make sure you're getting best performance, let's come back to this. You want to get best performance from your Pi. Some great things you can do is you can make sure you've got the right power supply, and couple that with the right case. I suggest a case which will cool the board sufficiently so that you're not hitting those thermal limits and your performance is at the maximum. In many applications, you won't even notice that the board's been throttled, because performance will drop down. But depending on what you're doing, I've run these boards with just like this, and I've been have them demonstrated to me by Pi doing this, and I couldn't tell. But if you want to guarantee you've got that full CPU performance, then make sure we've got some cooling on there. Okay. As with any Raspberry Pi, we don't need to use this as a desktop PC. I feel in education the most likelihood is you're going to be doing that, but you can run this headless, in many ways. So you can use it for like a NAS controller, web server, media server, all those typical applications which have become very popular uses of a Raspberry Pi. And again, you're going to benefit from the high performance of the CPU in some of those applications. Things may be a bit smoother, etc. But if it's in a more of an industrial application, what you might be doing, you might be running some kind of vending machine or something, you may find that, you know, actually we don't need the extra performance of this. So let's carry on using a Pi 4. These are still heavily available now. Stock's becoming good again, and there is a slight uplifting cost on a Pi 5. So you might say, well, actually, for the, I don't know, roughly 10% extra Pi 5 is, I don't need that performance. So Pi 4 is still a really great choice. So, question: if I've got an SD card on here, I've got an SD card on here, and I'm running software, you know, can we just run the same software? And the answer is no. The Raspberry Pi 5 will require a latest or the newest version of the Raspberry Pi operating system, which is going to be called Bookworm. We are being told that will be available around about mid-October. Obviously, we've got a version that we've been able to have a play with, but it will be officially released in about mid-October, which will timing with the release of the Raspberry Pi 5 board for general purchase. I say in that week beginning the 23rd of October. So don't worry, you know, yeah, you will need new software, but that software will be available and ready for you to use at the point you get your Pi 5 board. Okay, so I know I've gone probably quite quick there, but I hope I've sort of covered some nice points for you on that board. I hope you're interested like we are. I'm sure when they're freely available and you all get your hands on one, should you wish to, you know, there'll be probably more questions at that point, or we'll see some really interesting ways in which you're choosing to use these Pi boards. But in the meantime, if you do have any questions, I don't believe we have any at the moment. I'm just going to check with Mark. If you do have any questions, please feel free to just message us on YouTube on this video, you know, or drop us a line, and we'll do our very best to help you with them. So yeah, so maybe we'll do more videos on the Pi 5 soon, but for now, take care everyone. Hope you have a great day, and yeah, we'll see you soon.